I have a question for you before we start. Have you ever trusted someone and instantly regretted it? Comment yes or no below. And if you enjoy real, raw storytelling, like this video so I know to make more like it.
The antiseptic burned against my fingertips as I scrubbed them raw beneath the hospital's fluorescent lights. Another 18-hour shift, and the emergency room was finally quieting. My shoulders ached under the weight of exhaustion, my scrub spotted with other people's blood. Just one more hour, I told myself. One more hour and I could collapse into my tiny apartment, where the rent was 3 months overdue. Nina, we've got another one coming in. The charge nurse's voice cut through my momentary peace. I nodded, stuffing the granola bar I'd been saving back into my pocket. Food would have to wait, again. The sliding doors hissed open, and I expected the usual: a car accident victim, a bar fight, maybe another overdose. But what entered instead sent a ripple through the ER staff. First came 2 men in immaculate suits despite the late hour, their eyes scanning every corner of the room, hands positioned too close to their jackets. Behind them, supporting a third man between them, were 2 more suited figures. The man in the middle, the one they carried, wore a black coat that probably cost more than my yearly salary. His head hung forward, dark hair obscuring his face, but I could see blood seeping through his sleeve, dripping onto our recently mopped floors. GSW to the right shoulder. No police, the first man said, his accent thick with Eastern European cadence. His eyes met mine, cold and evaluating. Private room. Now. The charge nurse, Helen, who had survived 20 years of Chicago's worst traumas, went completely still. "Sir, we have protocols. Now," he repeated. His hand slipped partially inside his jacket. That's when the bleeding man raised his head. "Enough, Vasily." His voice was quiet, but carved through the tension like a blade. Despite his obvious pain, his posture straightened, and suddenly, he didn't seem supported by his men so much as surrounded by them. His eyes, startlingly pale against olive skin, swept the room before landing on me. "You, doctor, she's just a nurse," one of his men muttered. "I said doctor," he corrected, never breaking his gaze from mine. "I wasn't a doctor, not yet. 3 more years of saving, of working double shifts, of fighting the system that had already buried me in debt from my first failed attempt at medical school. But I was the closest thing to a trauma specialist on the night shift. Examination room 3, I heard myself say, surprising everyone, including myself. It's at the end of the hall, private." The man nodded once, a barely perceptible movement that nonetheless seemed to set everything in motion. His men moved him down the hall, their expensive shoes squeaking against the linoleum. Helen caught my arm as I grabbed a trauma kit. "Nina, you don't have to." "I know who they are," I whispered. Everyone in Chicago knew the Sokolov family controlled everything from the docks to City Hall, but he's still bleeding. The police. We'll ask questions none of us want to answer. I squeezed her hand. "I've got this. Just keep everyone else away." The examination room was already transformed when I entered. 2 men stood at the door, another by the window. The injured man sat on the table, coat removed, dress shirt unbuttoned to reveal a gunshot wound that had torn through his right shoulder. He wasn't looking at his injury, he was looking at me. "Everyone out," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. No one moved. "I need to treat him. Alone." I set down my supplies, meeting the pale eyes of the man who could probably have me disappeared with a single word. A slight curve touched his lips. Not quite a smile. "You heard her," he said, and like magic, his men filed out, though only as far as the hallway, I was certain. I pulled on gloves and approached, forcing my hands not to tremble. "I need to cut away the shirt." He nodded, and I noticed how controlled his breathing was. Most men with bullet wounds were either screaming or in shock. He seemed merely inconvenienced. "I'm Nina," I said, using medical scissors to carefully cut away the blood-soaked fabric. "Is that relevant to my treatment?" he asked, his voice low and surprisingly soft. "I like to know who I'm putting my hands on." The words slipped out before I could censor them. His eyebrows rose slightly. "Mikhail," he replied after a pause, offering nothing more. The wound was clean, through and through. The bullet had missed anything vital, though blood loss was substantial. "You're lucky," I said, cleaning the area. "Luck has nothing to do with it," he responded. "Skill, perhaps. His or mine remains to be determined." I worked methodically, my exhaustion momentarily forgotten as I cleaned, stitched, and dressed the wound. He never flinched, never made a sound, though I knew the pain must have been excruciating without proper anesthesia. He smelled of expensive cologne, gunpowder, and copper, the last from his own blood. Up close, I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the slight gray at his temples. Not young, but powerful in the way that made age irrelevant. "You have steady hands," he observed while I tied off the final stitch. "I'm working on becoming a doctor." "Working on?" Life got in the way. I secured the bandage, avoiding those eyes that seemed to see too much. "Life," he repeated, as if testing an unfamiliar word. "Life has a way of doing that." I stepped back, stripping off my gloves. "Keep it clean and dry. Change the dressing daily. You should see a real doctor in 3 days to check for infection." "You're not a real doctor." A dangerous edge crept into his voice. "Not yet," I admitted, "but I'm the best you'll get tonight without questions." He nodded slowly, rebuttoning his shirt with his left hand. I moved to help him, then caught myself. Something told me this was not a man accustomed to being touched without permission. "Your hospital," he said as he eased himself off the table. "It's struggling. Budget cuts, outdated equipment." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "We do what we can." He reached into his pocket, and I instinctively stepped back. He paused, those pale eyes noting my reaction, before withdrawing a business card. No name, just a number. He placed it on the table. "If you need anything," he said. I didn't take it. "I don't need anything from you." That almost smile again. "Everyone needs something, Nina." The way he said my name sent a chill down my spine. And debts must always be repaid. There's no debt. I was doing my job. He studied me for a moment longer. "We'll see." His men appeared at the door without being called, surrounding him once more. I watched them leave, the cards still sitting on the examination table. After they disappeared, I sank into a chair, my hands finally beginning to shake. I stared at the card for a long time before tucking it into my pocket. Not because I intended to use it, I told myself, but because it was evidence of what had happened. I filed no report that night. Neither did Helen. The security cameras in examination room 3 mysteriously malfunctioned. By the time my shift ended, I'd almost convinced myself it had been a stress-induced hallucination. Until I reached my apartment building and saw the sleek black car parked outside. My heart hammered against my ribs as I ducked into the alley, taking the fire escape up to avoid my own front door. The apartment was dark and empty when I finally climbed through my window, scraping my knee on the frame. I collapsed onto my bed, still in my scrubs, telling myself I was being paranoid. The pounding on my door came at exactly 6 a.m. I jolted awake, disoriented, grasping for a weapon and finding only a textbook. The pounding continued. "Nina Russo," a voice called. Not one I recognized from the hospital. "Open the door." I pressed my eye to the peephole. Another suited man, another expressionless face. "What do you want?" I called, voice raspy with fear. "Mr. Sokolov requests your presence." Sokolov. My blood turned to ice. Everyone knew the name, whispered in Chicago's shadows. Mikhail Sokolov. I'd treated the head of the Russian mob and hadn't even realized it. "I'm not going anywhere," I replied, trying to sound braver than I felt. "This is not a request you can decline." His tone remained neutral, but the threat was clear. "I have work. Your shift has been covered." Of course it had. "Please pack an overnight bag." Overnight? Panic clawed at my throat. I treated his wound. "Mr. Sokolov will determine when debts are settled." A pause. "You have 10 minutes. The alternative is less comfortable." I stepped back from the door, mind racing. The fire escape? They'd be watching it now. Call the police? And tell them what? I'd voluntarily treated a mob boss and was now being summoned? They were probably on his payroll anyway. The business card seemed to burn in my pocket. This was why he'd given it to me, not so I could call him, but so his men could find me. 10 minutes later, I emerged with a small duffel bag containing a change of clothes, my phone charger, and pepper spray. I had no illusion would help me. The man nodded approvingly and gestured to the car. "Where are you taking me?" I asked as he opened the door. "To answer Mr. Sokolov's summons," he replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The car door closed behind me with the finality of a coffin lid. As we pulled away from my apartment, away from everything familiar and safe, I realized I'd made a critical error in that hospital room. I'd shown competence, and in Mikhail Sokolov's world, competence was a commodity to be owned. Block 2. The car's interior was cold and smelled of leather and something faintly metallic. The driver and the man who'd collected me sat in silence, the city passing by in a blur outside tinted windows. I tried to memorize our route, but after 30 minutes of turns and backtracking, I lost my bearings completely. We were heading away from downtown Chicago. That much I knew. "Why does he want me?" I finally asked, unable to bear the silence. The man beside me, younger than I'd first thought, maybe early 30s, glanced at me. "Mr. Sokolov doesn't explain his reasons. He was shot. I treated him. End of story." A ghost of a smile. "If it were the end of the story, you wouldn't be here." My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I reached for it instinctively. "I wouldn't," the man said, his hand moving to rest on mine. Not gripping, just a warning. "Privacy is appreciated. My friend will worry if I don't answer. Helen was the only one who might actually notice my absence. Your friend knows you won't be at work today. That's sufficient." The casual way he said it sent a chill through me. How far did Sokolov's influence reach? Into the hospital schedules, apparently. Into my life. Definitely. The car turned onto a private road, bordered by tall iron gates that opened silently as we approached. Trees lined the long driveway, screening what lay ahead until the last moment, when the estate came into view. Not a house, but a fortress disguised as a mansion. All stone and glass perched on the lake shore, its windows reflecting the morning light like warning beacons. Security cameras tracked our arrival. Men stationed at strategic points around the property watched with cold professional interest. The car stopped at the main entrance, where wide stone steps led to massive double doors. "Mr. Sokolov is still resting," the young man said as he opened my door. "You'll be shown to your quarters until he's ready to see you." Quarters. Not a room, not a cell. The word choice felt deliberate, designed to confuse rather than comfort. A woman met us at the door, mid-50s, steel gray hair pulled into a severe bun, wearing a simple black dress that screamed authority. "Ms. Rousseau," she said, her accent thicker than the men's. "I am Irina. I manage the household." She looked me over, making no effort to hide her disapproval of my worn jeans and wrinkled blouse. I'd changed out of my scrubs but had few options that would impress in a place like this. "This way," she said, turning without waiting for a response. The interior of the house was surprisingly austere for a man of Sokolov's wealth, elegant but sparse, with hardwood floors, cream walls, and minimal decoration. No family photos, no personal touches. It felt like an elaborate hotel rather than a home. "Why am I here?" I asked as we climbed a curved staircase. "Mr. Sokolov will explain when he sees you." Irina's tone made it clear further questions were unwelcome. The quarters turned out to be a suite larger than my entire apartment. A sitting room opened to a bedroom with a king-sized bed, and beyond that, a bathroom with a shower that could fit 5 people. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lake Michigan, the water stretching to the horizon. "You'll find suitable clothes in the closet," Irina said. "Yours will be taken for cleaning." I clutched my bag tighter. "I prefer my own clothes." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Mr. Sokolov has standards for his guests." "I'm not a guest, What was I?" Prisoner seemed melodramatic, but not entirely inaccurate. "You are here at Mr. Sokolov's invitation," she replied. "That makes you a guest, for now." The implied threat hung in the air between us. "When will I see him?" I asked. "When he asks for you." She moved toward the door. "The room is monitored. For your safety, of course. Do not attempt to leave the suite unescorted." The door closed behind her with a soft click, but I heard the unmistakable sound of a lock engaging. Guest indeed. I explored my gilded cage, finding the closet filled with clothes in my size, everything from casual wear to evening gowns, all with price tags removed but obviously expensive. How long had he been planning this? How had he known my sizes? The thought of Sokolov's men going through my apartment, examining my clothes, made me shudder. The bathroom contained high-end toiletries, a hairdryer, makeup, all brand new. The medicine cabinet held basic first aid supplies, nothing that could be used as a weapon. I checked my phone. No signal. Of course. Hours passed. I showered, if only to wash away the hospital smell that still clung to me, and changed into the least intimidating outfit I could find, black pants and a simple blue sweater. I paced the room, tried to read a book from the small collection on a shelf, and finally curled up in a window seat, watching the lake water turn golden in the late afternoon sun. When the door finally opened, I expected Irina, or perhaps another suited man. Instead, Mikhail Sokolov himself stood in the doorway. He looked different in daylight, more substantial somehow. His dark hair was combed back from his face, highlighting sharp cheekbones and those unsettling pale eyes. He wore a simple black shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, the right sleeve looser to accommodate the bandage I'd applied, black pants, expensive shoes. No tie, no jacket. Casual for him. Ms. Russo, he said, his voice the same quiet strength I remembered. I hope you've been comfortable. I stood, crossing my arms. Why am I here? He entered the room, closing the door behind him. I noticed he moved his right arm carefully, the only indication that the wound caused him any pain. Direct. I appreciate that quality. He gestured to the sitting area. Please. It wasn't a request. I sat on the edge of an armchair while he took the sofa opposite, moving with deliberate grace. You treated my injury last night, he said. Yes, and now I've been kidnapped. His expression hardened for just a moment before smoothing back to neutral. You were invited, perhaps urgently, but invited nonetheless. Why? Because I require your services. A cold dread settled in my stomach. I'm not that kind of nurse. For the first time, I saw genuine surprise on his face, followed by something that might have been amusement. Your professional medical services, Ms. Russo. Nothing more. There are dozens of doctors on your payroll, I'm sure. Real doctors. None I trust at the moment. He leaned forward slightly. Someone shot me last night. Someone who should not have known my location. And that's my problem because until I determine who is responsible, I need a medical professional who is definitively not connected to my organization. His eyes never left mine. You have no ties to any family in Chicago. No criminal record. No suspicious financial transactions. Your life is an open book of work, study, and struggle. The casual recitation of my background made me feel naked. You had me investigated. Thoroughly. In what, 8 hours? I'm efficient. He stood, moving to the window. I have a proposition for you, Nina Russo. I'm not interested. You haven't heard it yet. He turned back to me, the fading sunlight casting half his face in shadow. 2 weeks. You remain here as my personal medical attendant. Ensure my wound heals without complication. In return, your remaining medical school debt will be paid in full, plus compensation for your time. I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. My medical school debt? $173,422.16 as of this morning. The precise figure, the exact amount that had haunted me for years, knocked the breath from my lungs. Why would you do that? I repay my debts, Ms. Russo. You provided a service when I needed it most. Now I'm offering you what you need most. Freedom isn't for sale. Everyone's freedom has a price. Yours happens to be quite specific. He moved closer, and I fought the urge to back away. You're already a prisoner, Nina, to your debt, to your circumstances. I'm offering a different cage, temporary, but with a door that opens to the life you actually want. His words hit with uncomfortable precision. How many double shifts had I worked? How many sleepless nights? How many meals skipped? All because of that number. And here he was, offering to erase it as casually as ordering dinner. What's the catch? I asked, because there had to be one. The terms are as stated. You stay. You tend my wound. You speak to no one about what you see or hear. After 2 weeks, you return to your life, debt-free, with a generous bonus. And if I refuse? His expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Then you return to your life as it was, with my assurance that our paths will never cross again. It should have been reassuring. It wasn't. I need to think about it, I said. Of course, you have until dinner. He moved to the door. 8 o'clock. Irina will bring you something appropriate to wear. I can dress myself. His hand paused on the doorknob. Consider it part of the experience, Nina. If we're to work together, you should understand the world you're entering. After he left, I sank onto the bed, mind racing. It was madness to even consider his offer. 2 weeks with a dangerous man who controlled half the city. 2 weeks in a house where every movement was watched, every word recorded. 2 weeks playing nurse to a criminal who spoke of debt and honor in the same breath as he ordered people kidnapped. But freedom from my debt, the thought was intoxicating. No more 18-hour shifts. No more choosing between textbooks and groceries. A clear path to finishing medical school without the weight that had been crushing me for years. At precisely 7:30, Irina returned carrying a garment bag. Mr. Sokolov suggested this, she said, hanging it on the closet door. Inside was a simple black dress, elegant but modest. Nothing overtly sexual or demeaning, as I'd half feared. Still, the idea of wearing clothes he'd selected made my skin crawl. My clothes are fine, I said. Irina's expression didn't change. Mr. Sokolov isn't the one wearing them. I met her gaze steadily. If he wants my medical expertise, he'll have to accept my wardrobe choices. A flicker of something, respect perhaps, crossed her face. As you wish. Dinner is served in 30 minutes. I will escort you down. When she left, I changed back into my own clothes, the same jeans, but with a clean sweater from my overnight bag. A small rebellion, but it felt necessary to establish that while he might control my location, he didn't control me. Irina returned precisely on time, her disapproval evident but unspoken. She led me down the sweeping staircase and through a series of rooms, each more impersonal than the last, until we reached a dining room, where a table that could seat 20 was set for 2. Mikhail already sat at the head, rising slightly as I entered. The gesture seemed automatic, ingrained long ago by someone who valued manners. He'd changed into a dark suit, his injured arm now hidden beneath a perfectly tailored jacket. His eyes took in my rebellious wardrobe choice, but he merely gestured to the chair to his right. Ms. Russo, please join me. As I took my seat, the gravity of the situation hit me. I was about to have dinner with one of Chicago's most dangerous men. And by the end of the meal, I would have to give him my answer. Dinner was a silent, tense affair. The food, some kind of delicate fish with vegetables I couldn't name, arrived carried by servers who moved like ghosts, appearing and disappearing without acknowledgement. Mikhail ate methodically, his movements precise despite his injury. I barely touched my plate, my appetite smothered by anxiety. "You're not eating," he observed, breaking the silence. "I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten since your shift at the hospital. Nearly 24 hours. He took a sip of water. No wine for him, I'd noticed. Your body needs sustenance regardless of your emotional state. The clinical assessment irritated me. Do you monitor everyone's eating habits? Or am I special? A slight upturn at the corner of his mouth. I notice details, Nina. It's kept me alive. Is that what happened to your shoulder? Noticing details. His expression cooled. A momentary lapse. It won't happen again. Because you'll have me around to patch you up? He set down his fork with deliberate care. Have you made your decision? I pushed my plate away. Yes. And? I'll stay. 2 weeks, but I have conditions. His eyebrows rose slightly. You're negotiating? If you want me here, yes. I straightened in my chair, meeting his gaze directly. First, I need to contact my friend Helen. Just a text saying I'm taking personal time. Nothing specific. He considered this acceptable. The message will be reviewed before sending. Second, I need my medical supplies. Not just whatever you have here, my own kit, my references. I can provide better equipment than a struggling ER. It's not about quality, It's about familiarity and having something of my own in this strange place. He nodded. Your supplies will be collected. What else? I took a deep breath. I want a written agreement, the exact terms. My debt cleared, compensation for 2 weeks, and my guaranteed safe return. For a long moment, he just looked at me, those pale eyes assessing. Then he reached into his jacket with his left hand and withdrew a folded document, sliding it across the table. Already prepared, he said quietly. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded the paper. There it was. Everything I just asked for, spelled out in legal language, including the exact amount of my debt, and an additional $50,000 as compensation for services rendered. At the bottom was a signature, M. Sokolov, the letters sharp and decisive. You were that certain I'd agree? I asked, unsettled. I was certain you were practical. He handed me a pen. Your life has been defined by survival, Nina. This is simply another survival choice. The way he said it, without judgment or pity, made it somehow worse. I signed the paper before I could change my mind, the pen heavy in my hand. Excellent, he said, taking back the document. We begin tonight. After dinner, you'll examine my wound. I need to see your medical history, any allergies, conditions. Irina will provide what's necessary. He glanced toward the doorway, where she had materialized as if summoned. Show Ms. Russo to the medical room once she's finished her meal. He stood, buttoning his jacket with his good hand. Until later. After he left, I forced myself to eat a few bites, aware of Irina's watchful presence. The food was undoubtedly excellent, but it could have been cardboard for all I tasted. The medical room turned out to be a fully equipped clinic that would make most hospitals jealous. State-of-the-art monitoring equipment, surgical supplies, medications, all meticulously organized and immaculately clean. Mr. Sokolov will join you shortly, Irina said. Everything you require should be here. Who maintains this? I asked, running a finger along a tray of surgical instruments. We have specialists who visit when needed. But not now. Her expression remained neutral. As Mr. Sokolov explained, there are trust issues at present, because someone shot him. She stiffened slightly. You should not concern yourself with matters beyond your responsibilities. Hard not to when those matters put a bullet through my patient. She studied me for a moment. You are direct for someone in your position. And what position is that? Temporary, she replied, turning to leave. Remember it. I was examining the medication cabinet when Mikhail entered. He'd removed his jacket and tie, and his shirt was already unbuttoned halfway down his chest. The clinical part of my brain noted the lean muscle beneath olive skin, while another part registered his physicality in a way that made me immediately redirect my attention to the bandage visible beneath his partially removed shirt. Sit, I instructed, gesturing to an examination table. He complied with surprising docility, finishing the removal of his shirt. The bandage I'd applied at the hospital was still in place, no blood seeping through, a good sign. Any pain? I asked, pulling on gloves. Manageable. That's not an answer. His eyes met mine. 7 out of 10 when moving, 4 at rest. I nodded, gently removing the bandage. The wound looked clean, the stitches intact. No signs of infection. I cleaned the area, my touch professional despite the intimacy of the situation. The exit wound? I asked. He turned slightly, allowing me access to his back. The smaller hole where the bullet had exited was similarly clean. You're healing well, I said, applying fresh bandages. But you need to rest the arm completely. No movement if possible. That's not practical. Neither is tearing your stitches and developing an infection. I disposed of the old bandages. Do you have antibiotics? He nodded toward a cabinet. Everything is there. I found what I needed and prepared an injection. When I turned back, he was watching me with an intensity that made me pause. What? I asked. You're different here, he observed. More confident. This is my territory. Medicine. I indicated the needle. This will sting. He didn't even flinch as I administered the injection, his eyes never leaving my face. The silence between us grew heavy with unasked questions. Who shot you? I finally asked, disposing of the needle. That doesn't concern you. It does if they might try again while I'm here. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Concerned for my safety or yours? Both. I don't want to get caught in the crossfire of whatever war you're fighting. He studied me for a long moment. There is no war, Nina. Merely a reorganization of relationships. That involves bullets? Sometimes. He rebuttoned his shirt one-handed, declining my offer of help with a slight shake of his head. You're safe here. No one would dare breach this house. The certainty in his voice should have been reassuring. Instead, it reminded me of exactly who he was. A man whose power was built on fear and violence. I'd like to go back to my room now, I said, suddenly exhausted by the day's events. He nodded, calling for Irina without raising his voice. She appeared so quickly she must have been waiting just outside. One more thing, he said as I reached the door. Tomorrow morning. Breakfast at 7. We have matters to discuss. It wasn't a request. Back in my gilded cage, I tried to process everything that had happened. 24 hours ago, I'd been an overworked ER nurse with crushing debt and fading dreams. Now I was the private medical attendant to a mob boss with a contract promising financial freedom if I survived the next 2 weeks. I sent the approved text to Helen. Just enough to keep her from worrying, not enough to raise questions. Then I lay on the too-soft bed, staring at the ceiling. Certain sleep would never come. I woke disoriented, sunlight streaming through windows I didn't recognize. For one blissful moment, I forgot where I was. Then reality crashed back. The mansion, the contract, Mikhail Sokolov. A knock at the door announced Irina, who entered carrying a tray. Breakfast, she said, setting it on a small table by the window. Mr. Sokolov asked me to inform you he's been called away unexpectedly. Your morning meeting is postponed. Relief flooded through me, a reprieve, however brief. When will he return? When his business is concluded. She moved to the door. The grounds are available for your use today, under escort. Mr. Sokolov thought you might appreciate fresh air. After she left, I investigated the tray. Coffee, toast, fruit. Simple, but high quality. My stomach growled, reminding me how little I'd eaten the day before. I spent the morning exploring the mansion under the watchful eye of a guard who introduced himself only as Dmitri. The house was larger than it first appeared, with wings extending in multiple directions, most areas closed off or locked. The parts I could access were all similarly impersonal. Expensive but generic art, furnishings that looked barely used, no photographs or mementos anywhere. Does he actually live here? I asked Dmitri, as we walked through a sitting room that looked like a museum display. Mr. Sokolov has many residences, he replied, his accent thicker than Mikhail's. For security. It doesn't look like anyone lives here. Dmitri's expression remained impassive. Mr. Sokolov values privacy. The grounds were more impressive, manicured gardens stretching to the lakeshore, a pool area sheltered by tall hedges, even a small orchard. All surrounded by a high stone wall topped with security cameras and, I suspected, more deterrents I couldn't see. I was sitting by the pool, enjoying the September sun, when I heard the unmistakable sound of helicopters approaching. Dmitri immediately straightened, hand moving inside his jacket. Inside, he ordered. Now. What's happening? Inside. This time there was no room for argument. He rushed me back to the house through corridors I hadn't seen before, eventually returning me to my suite. Remain here until called for, he said, locking the door behind him. Through the windows, I could see men moving with purposeful efficiency across the grounds. Something had happened, something that put the entire estate on alert. Hours passed. No one came. No explanation was offered. I tried the door, still locked. My phone, still no signal. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lake. Just as I was considering whether the sheets would hold my weight if I tried to escape through the window, the lock clicked. I expected Irina, or perhaps Dmitri. Instead, Mikhail stood in the doorway, his face a mask of controlled fury, blood staining his shirt. Blood that wasn't his. Your services are required, he said, his voice colder than I'd yet heard it. Immediately. I followed Mikhail through corridors I hadn't been shown before, deeper into the mansion's west wing. His pace was brisk despite his injury, and the tension radiating from him made me reluctant to ask questions. The blood on his shirt was fresh, dark crimson splatter patterns that told a story of proximity to violence. We entered a room dominated by a hospital bed, where a young man lay unconscious, his face bruised almost beyond recognition. Blood soaked through hastily applied bandages on his torso. 2 men stood by the wall, their expressions grim. "What happened to him?" I asked, immediately moving to check his pulse, weak but present. "He was discovered," Mikhail replied cryptically, nodding to the men who promptly left, closing the door behind them. I peeled back the bandages, revealing a knife wound that had penetrated deep into the abdomen. "He needs a hospital. Surgery." "That's not possible. He could die without proper treatment." Mikhail's expression remained impassive. "Then ensure he doesn't die. You have everything you need here." I looked around at the equipment, surgical instruments, monitors, even a portable ultrasound. This wasn't just a first aid station. It was prepared for exactly this scenario. "I'm not a surgeon," I protested, though I was already washing my hands, medical training overriding my objections. "You've assisted in trauma surgeries. I've seen your hospital records." Of course he had. Assisting isn't the same as performing. "You're his only chance, Nina." His voice softened slightly. "And I'm told you're very good." The flattery didn't mask the implicit threat. If this man died, it wouldn't reflect well on me. I took a deep breath, assessed the wound more carefully, internal bleeding. "But if I moved quickly, I need an assistant," I said. "Irina has medical training." Within minutes, she appeared wearing scrubs, her hair now concealed under a surgical cap. Together, we prepped the patient, started IVs, administered antibiotics and blood. They even had his type ready, which raised questions I didn't have time to ask. I lost myself in the procedure, instinct and training taking over. The wound had damaged the spleen but miraculously missed other vital organs. I controlled the bleeding, repaired what damage I could, and closed with stitches that would leave less scarring than the rushed field dressing would have. Throughout the impromptu surgery, Mikhail remained in the room, silent and watchful. Not once did he leave or check his phone. His focus remained on the unconscious young man. And on me. "He'll live," I said finally, stripping off my gloves. "But he needs real post-operative care." "You'll provide it," Mikhail replied. He approached the bed, looking down at the patient's face with an expression I couldn't read. "His name is Alexei. He's my brother." I stared at Mikhail, reassessing everything. "Your brother?" "Half-brother. Much younger." He touched Alexei's hand briefly. "He was working for me. Undercover." Understanding dawned. "He was your informant, looking for whoever shot you." Mikhail's eyes met mine, their usual coolness now tinged with something darker. "He found them. At considerable cost." The implication sent a chill down my spine. "And now I handle the situation." He moved toward the door. "Stay with him. If his condition changes, call for Irina immediately." "Mikhail," I said, surprising myself by using his first name. He paused, hand on the doorknob. "What are you going to do?" He studied me for a long moment. "It's better if you don't know. If it involves more people needing emergency surgery, it won't." He cut me off. "That phase is concluded." The certainty in his voice told me everything. Retribution had already been delivered. I spent the night monitoring Alexei, checking his vitals, adjusting his medication. He was young, early 20s at most, with features similar enough to Mikhail's to confirm their relation. Around dawn, he finally regained consciousness, disoriented and in pain. "Where?" His voice was barely audible. "You're safe," I assured him, checking his pupils. "I'm Nina. I'm a nurse." His eyes, the same pale color as his brother's, focused on me with confusion. "Mikhail's Nina?" The possessive pronoun startled me. "I'm taking care of your brother's wound, and now yours." A ghost of a smile touched his swollen lips. "He found you." Before I could ask what he meant, Alexei drifted back to sleep, the pain medication pulling him under. I sat back in my chair, troubled by his words. Mikhail's Nina. What had Mikhail told him about me? Morning brought Mikhail back to the room, now dressed immaculately in a fresh suit, no trace of yesterday's blood or fury. He checked on Alexei himself, his touch gentle as he brushed hair from his brother's forehead. "You should rest," he told me. "Irina will take over. I was exhausted but reluctant to leave my patient. I should monitor. You've been awake for over 24 hours. Doctor's orders." His tone was lighter than I'd ever heard it, almost teasing. "I'll have food sent to your room." Too tired to argue, I returned to my suite, showered away the antiseptic smell, and fell into bed, asleep almost before my head hit the pillow. I dreamed of blood and pale eyes and contracts signed in red ink. When I woke, the sun was setting. I'd slept the entire day. A covered tray sat on the table by the window, the food long cold. I was pulling on a sweater, intending to check on Alexei, when my door opened. Mikhail entered without knocking, carrying a bottle of vodka and 2 glasses. He'd shed his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves. Both of them, I noticed, despite his injury. "How is he?" I asked immediately. "Stable, improving." He set the glasses down, poured a measure into each. "Thanks to you." I accepted the vodka, needing its burn. "I was doing my job. You saved my brother's life." He raised his glass slightly. "That creates a bond between us, Nina." "There's no bond. There's a contract. Life doesn't reduce to paper terms." He took a seat across from me, movements fluid despite the wound I knew must still pain him. "You've proven yourself twice now. Trustworthy, skilled. What does that mean for me?" I asked warily. "It means I'm revising our arrangement." He sipped his vodka, eyes never leaving mine. "I want you to stay longer than 2 weeks. That wasn't our agreement. I'm prepared to be very generous." The calm way he said it, as if my consent were merely a formality, ignited something in me. "I'm not for sale, not for 2 weeks, not for longer." "Everyone has a price, Nina. You keep saying that, but it's not true." I set down my glass. "Some things matter more than money." "Like what?" "Freedom. Choice. Not spending my life patching up criminals after they stab each other." A dangerous stillness settled over him. "Is that what you think I'm asking? For you to be my personal criminal medic? Isn't it?" He leaned forward. "I'm offering you a place in my organization. Protection. Resources. Your medical school completed at the finest institutions, without debt or compromise." I stared at him. "Why would you do that? Because talent should be nurtured. Because loyalty should be rewarded." His voice dropped slightly. "Because I see potential in you that exceeds the limitations you've accepted." "Potential for what? To become like you?" A smile touched his lips, but didn't reach his eyes. "To become fully yourself, without the constraints that have held you back." The offer was seductive, not just the money or education, but the freedom from struggle he promised. Yet I knew the price would be my conscience, paid in increments so small I might not notice until it was gone completely. "I can't," I said softly. He studied me, head tilted slightly. "You haven't even asked what your duties would be." "It doesn't matter. I became a nurse to help people, not to enable violence. And who exactly do you help in that understaffed ER? The system is already broken, Nina. I'm offering you a chance to work outside it, by becoming part of your system instead? Trading one cage for another?" His expression hardened. "My offer expires at midnight. Think carefully before you refuse." After he left, I paced the room, mind racing. The rational part of me said to accept, to take his money, his protection, his promises of education and advancement. What difference did it make whose wounds I treated, as long as I could eventually help others? But a deeper part knew that once I stepped fully into Mikhail Sokolov's world, there would be no stepping out. The invisible threads would tighten until they became chains. Golden, perhaps, but chains nonetheless. I needed to leave. Now. Before midnight. Before he could make the decision for me. The lock on my door had been disengaged since Mikhail's visit. I slipped into the hallway, moving quietly toward the room where Alexei recovered. I had to check on him once more before I attempted escape. Professional obligation, I told myself. Not concern for the young man whose life I'd saved. Alexei was awake when I entered, propped up slightly against pillows, looking better than I'd expected. "Nina," he said, his voice stronger. "I wondered if you'd come." I checked his vitals, pleased with his progress. How's the pain? Bearable. His eyes, so like his brother's, studied me curiously. You're leaving, aren't you? I froze. What makes you say that? Your face. The way you're checking everything twice, saying goodbye without words. He shifted slightly, wincing. He won't stop you. Your brother. Mikhail respects choice, even when he doesn't like the outcome. Alexei's gaze was disconcertingly perceptive. But he's rarely wrong about people. If he made you an offer, there was reason. I adjusted his IV, avoiding his eyes. I don't belong in your world. Few do at first. It grows on you. A weak smile. Like family. A dangerous family. The best kind. His smile faded. Be careful out there, Nina. You've seen too much now. Not everyone is as principled as my brother. The warning lingered in the air between us. I completed my examination, left instructions for his care, and finally allowed myself one small admission. I'm glad you'll recover. Thanks to you. He caught my hand as I turned to leave. Whatever you decide, you've earned his respect. That's rare. And valuable. In the hallway, I stood for a long moment, torn between the path to the front door and the path back to my room. Freedom or security. Principles or pragmatism. The choice I made now would define everything that followed. I chose freedom. The night air bit through my thin sweater as I slipped out a service entrance, having navigated the mansion's labyrinthine corridors by memory and instinct. The security was lighter than I'd expected. Perhaps Mikhail truly didn't anticipate my leaving, or perhaps he'd ordered them to let me go. Either way, I found myself beyond the stone wall, trudging along the private road that led eventually to the main highway. My phone remained useless. No signal. Battery nearly dead. I had no money for a cab, no clear idea of exactly where I was. All I knew was that with each step away from the mansion, the tightness in my chest eased slightly, even as the cold September night wrapped around me. After nearly an hour of walking, headlights appeared behind me. I stepped off the road, heart hammering, ready to run into the dense trees if necessary. The car slowed, a sleek black sedan that could have been any of Sokolov's fleet. But when the window rolled down, it wasn't one of his men who looked out at me. It was Irina. "Get in," she said, her voice carrying the same flat authority as always. "I'm not going back. Did I say anything about going back?" She pushed open the passenger door. "It's 3 miles to the highway, then another 15 to the nearest town. Your choice." I hesitated, weighing my options. The night was getting colder, and my chances of finding another ride were slim. "He didn't send you?" I asked. "Mr. Sokolov doesn't know I'm here." Something like disapproval colored her tone. He wouldn't approve. That, more than anything, convinced me. I slid into the passenger seat, the car's warmth immediate and welcome. "Why are you helping me?" I asked, as she pulled back onto the road. Irina kept her eyes forward. "Mr. Sokolov values loyalty above all else. He surrounds himself with those who understand this principle. That doesn't answer my question, doesn't it?" She glanced at me briefly. "I've served the Sokolov family for 30 years. I watched Mikhail grow from a boy into the man he is now. My loyalty is to his best interests, even when he cannot see them clearly. And letting me go is in his best interest? You are a complication he doesn't need right now." Her hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "Alexei's injury has unsettled him, made him vulnerable to attachments. The implication stunned me. There's nothing between Mikhail and me." "Perhaps not from your perspective." She turned onto the highway, accelerating smoothly. "Where am I taking you?" "Chicago. My apartment." I gave her the address, mind still reeling from her words. Mikhail Sokolov attached to me? It seemed absurd. Yet I couldn't deny the intensity of his focus, the generosity of his offer, the personal attention he'd shown me despite his own injuries and responsibilities. We drove in silence for nearly an hour before Irina spoke again. "He will look for you." I figured. I watched the highway lights blur past. "Will he find me?" "If he wishes to." She signaled for an exit, but I don't think he will. "Why not?" "Because Mikhail respects strength. Walking away from what he offered took courage." A small, unexpected smile touched her lips. He admires that quality, even when it frustrates him. As the familiar outlines of Chicago's skyline appeared, a strange melancholy settled over me. I was going back to my life, my real life of double shifts and crushing debt and fading dreams. The fantasy of financial freedom was over. "Your contract," Irina said, as if reading my thoughts. She reached into her jacket pocket and handed me a folded paper, the agreement I'd signed. "What about it?" "It's still valid. Mr. Sokolov honors his commitments." I unfolded the paper with trembling hands. Across the bottom, beneath our signatures, a new line had been added in the same sharp handwriting. "Terms fulfilled. Debt to be cleared as agreed." "I don't understand," I whispered. "I didn't stay 2 weeks. You saved his brother's life." Irina's voice softened almost imperceptibly. "To Mikhail, that's worth more than any time frame." We reached my apartment building just before dawn, the streets quiet and empty. It looked smaller than I remembered, shabbier in the harsh light of reality after the luxury of Sokolov's world. "This is where we part ways, Nina Russo," Irina said as I opened the car door. "I suggest you return to your life and forget the past few days." I knew she was right. The safest path forward was to pretend none of it had happened. The gunshot wound, the mansion, Alexei, Mikhail's offer. Yet as I stepped out of the car, I found myself turning back, tell him. I hesitated, unsure what message I could possibly send that wouldn't sound like weakness or regret. Tell him I hope his shoulder heals well. Irina's expression remained impassive, but something like understanding flickered in her eyes. "Goodbye, Ms. Russo." The car pulled away, leaving me alone on the sidewalk with nothing but a signed contract and memories that already felt like a fever dream. Life resumed its familiar rhythms. I returned to the ER, explaining my absence as a family emergency. Helen asked questions at first, but eventually accepted my vague responses. The hospital remained understaffed. The patients kept coming, and my debt, true to Mikhail's word, vanished from my accounts within 3 days. A week passed, then 2. I found myself scanning the faces of suited men on the street, tensing when black sedans slowed near the hospital. But no one came for me. No messages, no surveillance that I could detect. It was as if Mikhail Sokolov had erased me from his world as completely as he'd erased my debt. I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt strangely hollow, as if I'd glimpsed something rare and powerful that I'd never experience again. On the 17th day after my escape, not that I was counting, I arrived home from a particularly brutal shift to find my apartment door unlocked. I froze in the hallway, heart pounding. Someone had been inside, might still be inside. My first thought was burglary, but nothing appeared disturbed when I cautiously peered through the cracked door. Instead, a single item sat on my kitchen table, a small, expensive-looking gift box, wrapped in silver paper with no card or marking. I approached it warily, half expecting it to explode. When nothing happened, I carefully unwrapped it, lifting the lid to reveal a cell phone. Sleek, new, and already activated. As I held it, it buzzed with an incoming text message from an unlisted number. 3rd and Monroe, 9 p.m. If you're curious, no signature, none needed. I stood in my kitchen, the phone heavy in my hand, wrestling with the decision. Going would be insane. Staying would be safe. But safety, I was beginning to realize, wasn't the same as living. At 8:55 p.m., I walked into the small Italian restaurant at 3rd and Monroe, wearing the one decent dress I owned. The maitre d' nodded as if expecting me, leading me through the main dining room to a private area and back. A single table was set for 2, with Mikhail Sokolov waiting beside it. He looked different, more relaxed, his suit less formal, his hair slightly tousled as if he'd been running his hands through it. The only familiar elements were those pale eyes, which tracked my approach with the same intensity I remembered. "You came," he said, moving to hold my chair. His right arm seemed to be healing well, the movement almost natural. "I was curious," I replied, taking the seat. "How's your shoulder?" "Healing nicely. Your work was excellent." He sat across from me, a bottle of wine already breathing between us. "And Alexei is recovering well. He asks about you." "I'm glad." I fidgeted with my napkin, suddenly nervous. "Why am I here, Mikhail?" He poured wine for both of us, his movements deliberate. Because I wanted to see you again. Why? You're direct as always. A smile touched his lips. I find myself thinking about you, more than is reasonable. The admission surprised me. I left. Yes, and that was your right. He raised his glass slightly. I misjudged what you wanted, which was not to be owned. His gaze was steady. I offered you security, but what you value is freedom. I understand that now. I took a sip of wine, needing a moment. So what's this? A new offer? This is dinner, Nina. Nothing more. He gestured to the restaurant around us. Neutral ground. No contracts. No expectations. Just two people who barely know each other. Two people who perhaps understand each other better than you think. He leaned forward slightly. You could have ignored my message. You didn't. That suggests curiosity, at minimum. He wasn't wrong. Despite everything, I had been unable to stop thinking about him, his confidence, his complexity, the glimpses of honor beneath the dangerous exterior. I have conditions, I said. His eyebrows rose slightly, amusement flickering in his eyes. Again with the negotiations, my life stays separate from yours. I don't treat your associates. I don't attend your functions. I don't become part of your world. Understandable. I finish medical school on my own terms. No interference, no shortcuts. He nodded. What else? I took a deep breath. Total honesty between us. I need to know who you really are. Not just what the rumors say. His expression sobered. That's a dangerous request, Nina. Knowledge has consequences. I've already seen enough to put me in danger. I'd rather know the full truth than half-truths. He considered this for a long moment. And in return? In return, I'll have dinner with you. Conversation. Nothing more promised. The corner of his mouth quirked upward. A limited offer. Take it or leave it. His smile widened into something genuine. I accept your terms. What followed was the strangest first date of my life, if it could be called a date at all. Over exquisite food I barely tasted, Mikhail Sokolov told me his story. Born in Russia to a minor crime family, brought to America at 12 when his father expanded operations. The violence of his childhood, the death of his mother, the strict code his father instilled. How he'd taken over the family business at 23 when his father was assassinated. How he'd expanded it beyond smuggling and protection into legitimate enterprises, real estate, shipping, technology investments. The world sees only one dimension of what I do, he said. The violence, the intimidation. They don't see the communities we protect, the businesses we save from predatory corporations, the families we support. You're still breaking the law, I pointed out. Some laws deserve to be broken. His eyes held mine. You've worked in that ER long enough to see how the system fails people. How many lives are destroyed because healthcare is a privilege, not a right? How many families bankrupted by medical bills? The system you work within is just as corrupt as mine. The difference is mine acknowledges its nature. I couldn't entirely disagree, which disturbed me. That doesn't justify violence. No, but it explains it. He twisted his wine glass slowly. Violence is sometimes necessary, but never my first choice. Despite what you may think, I don't enjoy it. Then why continue this life? You have money, connections. You could go legitimate completely. Could I? He smiled faintly. The world doesn't let men like me simply walk away, Nina. Too many people depend on me. Too many enemies wait for weakness. He paused. And there's Alexei. What about him? He's young, impulsive. If I stepped away, he would take over, and he lacks restraint. Mikhail's expression darkened. The devil you know is sometimes better than the one waiting to take his place. By the time we finished dinner, I felt as if I'd glimpsed a side of Mikhail Sokolov that few ever saw. The strategist, the reluctant leader, the man who lived by a code that was foreign to me, but internally consistent for him. May I walk you home? He asked as we stood outside the restaurant. I hesitated, then nodded. Just walking. The night was cool but pleasant, stars visible between the city's towers. We moved side by side, not touching, an invisible boundary between us that neither crossed. What happens now? I asked as we neared my building. That depends on you. He stopped, turning to face me. I would like to see you again, on your terms. Why me? There must be dozens of women who'd be easier, who wouldn't make demands or ask uncomfortable questions. Precisely why they don't interest me. His gaze was steady. You challenge me, Nina. You see the world differently than I do. And you're not afraid of me. I probably should be, but you're not. He stepped closer, still not touching me. Tell me to walk away, and you'll never see me again. Your debt is cleared, your future secured. No obligations. I knew I should say it. Tell him to leave, to never contact me again. It was the sensible choice, the safe choice. Yet the words wouldn't come. I need time, I said instead, to think about what this means, what it could become. He nodded, accepting this without protest. The phone I gave you, it's secure, untraceable. Use it when you've decided. And if I never call, then I have my answer. Something like vulnerability flickered across his face, so briefly I might have imagined it. But I hope you will. He didn't try to kiss me, didn't try to touch me. He simply inclined his head in a gesture that somehow carried more respect than any I'd received before, then turned and walked away, a solitary figure against the city lights. I watched until he disappeared, caught between worlds, between choices. 3 days later, I was back in the ER when they brought in a young woman, barely conscious, her face bruised beyond recognition. Domestic violence, the paramedics reported. Boyfriend had been beating her for months. This time, he'd nearly killed her. I worked to stabilize her, fury building with each new injury I discovered. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, cigarette burns on her arms. By the time we transferred her to surgery, my hands were shaking with rage. 3rd time she's been here this year, Helen said quietly as we cleaned up. Police do nothing. Restraining orders, just a piece of paper. She'll go back to him, another nurse added. They always do. Not this time, I heard myself say. Not if someone stops him first. Helen gave me a strange look. That's not our job, Nina, but what if it could be? The thought arrived unbidden, dangerous in its simplicity. That night, I pulled out the phone Mikhail had given me. I stared at it for a long time before typing a message. There's a man named Carl Jennings. He nearly killed his girlfriend today. She's in surgery at Chicago Memorial right now. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the send button. This was crossing a line, using Mikhail's power, his connections, for my own sense of justice. Once done, it couldn't be undone. My phone buzzed with a new text from Helen. Sarah didn't make it. Lost too much blood. Police still investigating. Sarah, she had a name. She had been someone's daughter, friend, maybe sister. Now she was a statistic. Another woman failed by a system designed to protect men like Carl Jennings. I hit send. The response came almost immediately. What would you like to happen to him? I took a deep breath and typed, justice, not death. But something he'll never forget. Consider it done. Dinner tomorrow? I smiled despite myself. Yes. But I'm buying this time. 3 days later, Carl Jennings was found beaten and bound on the steps of Chicago PD with evidence of his crimes. Photos, videos, text messages confessing to Sarah's murder, taped to his chest. He would never hurt anyone again. When I met Mikhail for dinner that night, neither of us mentioned Carl Jennings. We didn't need to. Something had shifted between us. An understanding. An acknowledgement that perhaps our different worlds could occasionally align for a greater purpose. I've been thinking about your conditions, he said, as we walked along the lakeshore afterward, closer now but still maintaining that careful distance. And I want to propose an addition. He stopped, turning to face me. When you become a doctor, which you will on your own merit, I'd like to fund a clinic, your clinic, in neighborhoods that need it most. I stared at him. Why would you do that? Because talent should be nurtured, because some systems need to be challenged from within. His eyes held mine, because I believe in what you could accomplish. With blood money? With money that could finally do some good. He moved closer, his voice softening. You don't have to answer now. It's just something to consider for the future. Our future. The unspoken implication hung in the air between us. I'm still not part of your world, I said firmly. No. You would be creating your own. He hesitated, then slowly reached out. giving me time to pull away before his fingers brushed mine. With occasional intersections between our spheres, the touch sent electricity up my arm. Intersections? Dinners, conversations. His fingers intertwined with mine. Perhaps
If you wished
more. Eventually, I didn't pull away. I still don't agree with everything you do. I would worry if you did. His thumb traced circles on my palm. Your moral compass is part of why I... He stopped, seeming to catch himself. Part of why you what? I pressed. His pale eyes met mine, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen them. Part of why I can't stop thinking about you. Why I sent Arena to make sure you got home safely that night. Why I had your debt cleared immediately, even knowing you might never speak to me again. The confession hung between us, raw and honest. This dangerous, powerful man had exposed a weakness. Me. This is complicated, I whispered. The best things usually are. He raised our joined hands, pressed his lips to my knuckles in a gesture both old-fashioned and intimate. I'm a patient man, Nina. I can wait while you decide what you want this to become. As he looked at me in the moonlight, I realized I was already deciding. Each step toward him was a choice, to see the complexity behind the feared name, to acknowledge the gray areas I'd once considered black and white, to admit that perhaps his world and mine weren't as separate as I'd believed. I want to take it slow, I said. One step at a time. He nodded, the relief in his eyes unmistakable. At your pace. Always. We continued our walk, hands still connected, the boundary between us not erased, but intentionally crossed. I didn't know where this path would lead, whether to heartbreak or something transformative. I only knew that for the first time in years, I was moving forward rather than simply surviving. Somewhere across the city, a clinic waited to be built, patients waited to be healed, and I, former ER nurse who had treated a Mafia boss's wound on a fateful night, was stepping into a future I never could have imagined. One where power and compassion, darkness and healing, might somehow coexist. The choice was mine, and I was finally ready to make it.